Hi, my name is Colin Chua. I'm currently 60 years old. Now, why I'm doing this, I think it's a way of trying to instill upon the younger ones around how we grew up, the challenges we went through, experience career-wise. It's probably left a legacy around. We don't get to talk to younger generations nowadays. So it's a good way to, in an informal way, to express ourselves. Probably in some ways leave a little bit of a legacy and learnings that the younger ones can, look back and understand through verbal dialogues, verbal history like that, and learn something. So then maybe let's start off. Yes, I was born in 1964, just turned 60. I was educated and of course in Singapore in my younger years, but I grew up not being able to speak Chinese. So a little bit of a different, because even my parents couldn't speak Chinese. I'm somewhat of a Peranakan family. So when I first went to primary school, I remember honestly the nightmare I had, because a lot of my classmates couldn't understand me because I spoke English with a slight accent coming from a highly English educated background. And then the Chinese lessons came in Mandarin, and then we had to write Chinese characters. I was dumbfounded. It was a nightmare. I was like, after probably about 6 months, the teachers called up my parents and started speaking to my mom, and my mom was also lost, not understanding. So we decided to move me to take up Malay, right? Coming from a Peranakan background, that helped a little bit, and I don't know, so could I have stayed back in Mandarin? Maybe the teacher had patience, I would have picked it up, but then I enjoyed, and I moved to the Malay class, and it was easier that way because you no longer had what you call Chinese characters where you to remember. It was phonetic alphabet, so it was easier. Long story short, I enjoyed my primary school years. During our time, probably we had less pressure from people in our generation. What was school days? You look forward to going to school, not because of the homework, because you played goalie, you played, in the old days we had this game called Yeah. I'm not sure whether a lot of younger generation understand that. It's a rubber band kind of thing. It's basically a jump rope thing, but using rubber bands do it. So pretty good at that because you could do it hard wheel. But the thing that struck me most of all was the rise of Bruce Lee, and that caught my interest in martial arts. And since then till now, martial arts has always been in my blood. Contact sports, to be honest with you. I did relatively well in how would I say, in primary school, not because I paid attention to the class. I think the key was I like to read, and one of the things probably my dad did a good favor for me was bought me a set of encyclopedias when I was primary 1. So be very candid with you, by the time I was 12, I read almost the whole of Britannica's encyclopedia. That doesn't mean I know everything, but I just read it. but that's also a part of me. I hated reading novels. That being said, now that I'm older, probably I like to read a novel or two, but it's a different phase in life. So how did I go in RI? First day in RI was kind of pleasant in a sense that all of a sudden, coming from a co-ed, you went to an all-boys school and they're all naughty boys. I'll be very candid with you. A lot of people think that RI is a place for nerds. I can tell you, it is not. In some ways, I think even now, I've got kids who went both the Raffles and ACS route. Schools like that, yeah, maybe you could call it elite schools, but in our generation, my classmates were not rich. Yes, there were a few of them. Classmates were parents, like my dad was a salesman, my mom, housewife. Sometimes she helps out domestic affairs to earn a little bit of money. But classmates were coming from hawkers, taxi drivers, tailors, people in generally elsewhere, right? The differences probably did a little bit well in PSLE, but I can tell you there are a lot of people who could have also gotten to RI, because in that generation it's more of a motivation as to some folks would say, oh, I can't get RI, I don't apply it, but those who attempted it got it. And RI was actually a place that I will never forget. This is a place where I made strong bonds, friends that I kept up to now, which till a month back, schoolmates, classmates, we gathered in Kuala Lumpur, and it's years since I met them, but the bond was still there. Now, coming back again, I know I digressed a little bit. Why would people, I enjoyed RI? Like I said, you had a diverse range of folks. Folks who, a friend of mine who were crazy about girls sitting next to me and was talking all about girls, and you're just becoming your teens, hormones raging on, so you can imagine the conversation in the all-boys school and the pranks you do. People like me who went non-stop about physics, lasers, aeroplanes. I've got friends who are into sports, so it's a whole diverse range of friends who were into orchestra and singing, friends who were acting, and I really enjoyed. So it was never about grades. It's about the whole experience, and I think that's what made us what we were. It wasn't just I'm not saying we weren't good in books, we were conscientious, but we weren't just mugging throughout, we were enjoying life. We spent most of our days in school, not because we were going through books, but because the friends were there. I got to learn how to swim. Well, I mean, I knew about a year ago, but RI was the only school, or probably the 3 schools then that had a swimming pool. I think that was ACS was one, RI was the other. And I can't remember whether Altram or something, there was another swimming pool. So swimming lessons. Music lessons also for some classes, but I can tell you I fell asleep and I got punished for that. That's where I started playing rugby. So all in all, loved the school, loved the people there. You would think they're all nerds, no, they're all pranksters. Boys who probably had a very strong pride in school. Pride, very proud of the heritage, proud of its motto, proud of its badge. And then, but then again, people ask me, so why did I abandon RI? Be candid with you. So after my O-levels, I was in a generation where I think RJ was just forming, so you had to spend 1 year in kind of a pre-U format and another year into a JC format. And I had good friends that I made with the likes Choyson, Gerald, Lawrence Tay, quite a lot. People I met while I was in RI. I was in the National Cadet Corps Air Team, and of course there were other teams, all that. And during those days, during competitions, there's always this camaraderie that you get to meet people from other schools, and I made good friends. And I thought to myself, I'd like to explore a JC type format versus a classroom type format, and I chose Anglo-Chinese mainly because it was close to where I live at Queenstown, and I made good friends. Cut the story short, life went on. Did my university education here, and after my first degree I went to Japan to study. I got a scholarship there. Folks would think, wow, your grades must be great, but candidly, I think my interview session where the Japanese interviewed me was a slightly different story. Bear in mind, at that time Singapore, I think, was still considered a developing country, so they were handing out scholarships. Just like we hand out ASEAN scholarships to invite people from Malaysia or other parts of ASEAN to come to Singapore, the Japanese were trying to encourage people, and it's a goodwill thing. And long story short, I got in. Grades were alright, I guess, but I think what impressed my interviewer was that I was at that time also into drama, Raffles Plays, and he was like shocked that I was somebody in theatre, but I also was into martial arts and rugby, and be candid with you, at that time I was also modeling, so he caught my attention. So I thought I would call a contrasting character, and lo and behold, So prior I went to Japan actually, so I didn't speak a word of Japanese. I was looking forward to it because of my passion in martial arts. I've been in karate and all that. Aikido, you name it, I took it up. I went to Japan. Prior to that, I was actually given tuition to learn Japanese, and that was my first foray. Folks were saying, wow, you must be a genius to be able to pick up Japanese like that. Candidly, when you have a very pretty girl, a one-to-one lesson, 5.5 days a week, 8 hours a day, sitting with that lady, God, you will pay attention to that lesson. Bear in mind though, I wasn't going after her because at that time I would have already met my wife, or I was dating her and I was madly in love with her, so no qualms about it. But it helped, and it helped that I picked up Japanese before I went to Japan. So a bit unique, I guess. Most friends of mine started out their career probably working in Singapore, local and all that, but my career mainly because I went to Japan, and after that, I worked for kind of a Japanese MNC, let's put it this way, with a joint American interest. And my first assignment after my studies was I was posted to Bangkok, and from then onward, my life was kind of exciting. Most people at envy say, wow, you led an exciting life, you went different. So in my career, I've lived and worked in Thailand, in Indonesia, in Vietnam. I've worked in Europe, I've worked in Japan again a few times, but all that. So for the first 7.5 years after I graduated or postgrad, I actually worked in a consultancy engineering line. But one of the things that I would like to impart to the younger generations, it sounds great, it sounds exciting when coming from a poor background. I mean, all of a sudden you're jet setting, leading an expat life, everything paid for. And I had a goal in mind. I wanted to be the regional or local managing director by 30. By all means, I achieved it. Not because it was solid, well, probably because I had a great networking skills, my language skills, and I was always traveling probably 10 months a year. I would not be in Singapore. The other 2 months I'll be either doing my reservist or something else. But that came at a price, and this is something that I like to share with a lot of younger generations. Great to look at career, great you have an ambition in life, but at the end of the day, you gotta ask yourself, what's your priority? What's your value? Is career or making money the be all and end all? Initially I thought I did, earning good money. But what struck me was my grandmother died, and I was very close to her, and I didn't know she died until 1 year later. Reason why? During my generation, you don't have internet, right? Mobile phones and all that, look, you gotta carry a huge luggage to carry, kind of those huge satellite phones. If you want to make an international call, IDD is extremely expensive. And I was working I was working to set up factories, projects, building plants. In Surabaya, I lived there. Vung Tau in Vietnam, Bangkok. Yes, I live in Bangkok, but my project somewhere else. So access to communication, mobile communication wasn't there. And like I said, I was so deep down into work. Of course, you play hard. And when I found out that my grandmother died, it was a hard choice, because when I went to visit her during Lunar New Year, and it's when I found out she already passed on. And that's where the aha moment crept in. And I gotta look around myself. Yes, title's great, fantastic name card. Money I made at that time, in my generation I thought was good. Probably in each generation now, if you consider inflation's peanuts, right? But value of money was different. While I made good money, I didn't save good money, mainly because When you work hard, you spend 12 hours a day or even more. Weekends you party a lot, especially when you're a bachelor, when you're overseas. I wasn't hedonistic or anything, but you felt like it. You just took a plane, you fly off to another part of the country, you golfed a lot, and you spend money without thinking because you're earning good money, US dollars, in places like Thailand or Indonesia, right? So without a thought for it. And then I took a step back and I kind of like look at what have I achieved in life, and I said, except for probably a fantastic name card, nothing, right? The girl, my current wife, that I was with nearly left me because I was hardly around. Friends, my RI friends, be candid with you, I've lost touch with every one of them. Friends in university because I was kept traveling and all that. So you take a step back and say, geez, I need to change. And that's where I started looking for something more stable. Well, long story short, I was lucky. I was tapped. Two companies at first. First was Siemens, and then which I joined. I hardly even started. They wanted me to do what I did in consulting, help them develop for their projects in the East. But there was another company that I never thought would hire me because of different skills. I would say different skill sets. When they hired me, it was still for the engineering side, but I told them, nope, I want to migrate to the business side of things. And that was the Royal Dutch Shell company, Shell group of companies. And I had been there till I retired. And it's one of the best companies I can attest to anyone if you ever have the opportunity to work for. An interesting part of that interview also was what made me want to join. Was not that because the company paid well, the company had a soul, had a value system. So when I was working on projects in the consulting firm, without naming names of course, you had to deal with a lot of corruption in these third world countries. And I rose up the ladder not because I gave out bribes. It was because I was always creative enough to develop the relationship. I didn't bring pre-COVID karaoke, by the way. I couldn't sing. If I ever sing in a karaoke, the patrons would all run away and the owners would kick me out. That's the thing. But I think I had a knack of fixing things, and that's why I rose the ladder pretty well. And then the interview I had in Shell, it was one of the, I wouldn't call it a final orientation with one of the directors, and it was a very simple question he asked me. He says, Colin, I look in your resume and talking to people in the industry, you're known as Mr. Fix-It. And he says, we've got a problem with one of our investments in Indonesia. I know you speak the language fluently. One of the ministers insisted that we help him out in some ways, and without naming names, we see that you're a Mr. Fix-It, you know how to do it. We would like you to fix it for us as part of your first project. Can you do this for us? This is what I want to know before you join us. I'd like to understand is how far are you willing to do this for the company? I sat back. I was like, cripes, I was in a quandary. I'm a staunch Christian, right? But it's also one of the things that I left the industry because I didn't want to get involved in shady deals or trying to navigate around shady deals. But this is a big company, Shell, and in my generation, it's one of the companies to join. And with a heavy heart, I told him, nah, I'm sorry, it's not something I'm prepared to do. And I was like resigned to be given the a negative answer for him that he can't join. But interestingly, his next words were, welcome to Shell. I love the company not because it made a lot of money. It's because of that value system. I think that's very important for the younger generation to join. It's never about money. It's something like It has to be with when you wake up in the morning, do you still see yourself part of that corporate family? Do you see yourself wanting to go to the company? It could be friends, it could be company ethos, but think about it. I think it's a contextual, cultural area, and the way we do work business in Asia, especially China, and or should I say Eastern culture and environment, including Japan, where the concept of Guanxi or relationship is very important, where there is a need to build trust. And how do you therefore balance this East versus Western, black and white around what can you do and what can you not do? And I think that's a gray area that I think I have managed to, I wouldn't say perfected, overcome in areas. I don't profess to be an expert, so probably I'll give you a couple of examples. I think firstly, you need to understand when it comes to government officers, and that's a legal quandary or legal stipulation where government officers are only allowed to spend or do that. So you need to bound with whatever the legal requirements of the country or the ethical compliance of your company. And there's no doubt about it, because the ramifications to you or even to the company and to the individuals are very high. But does that mean you do not create that environment of building trust and relationship? Does that mean you cannot be friends? You still can. So I give you an example of what I do in China. Because coming from the oil and gas industry, by nature, when and particularly I was running the shipping marine part of Shell for Asia Pacific Middle East. By nature, by dealing with a lot of these customers there, beyond the private, the big boys are actually state-owned companies. And a lot of senior management in the state-owned companies, by definition, are with party members. Some of them are very high-ranking, in oil and gas party members with the Communist Party. Now, I wouldn't say they're corrupted, but there's a way of doing things where they're comfortable in wanting to make sure that they trust you, they want to build you as a relationship. And I find that one of the best ways is building a relationship of trust with the individuals or students. We do it via dinners. It doesn't even have to be a fanciful dinner. You'll be surprised. Things like having your own barbecue, at a friend's house where you cook your own meal. You invite the person and say you cook for them, and you sit down. You see the value coming in? You have now personalized your home. You have opened up your home to the individuals. And you kind of bare bones think about career, he may even bare bones talk about issues. Of course, you're mindful around state secrets and all that. But that's building relationship. Another good way one of my staff member did was where he realized that one of my big customers, the daughter was planning to go to Tsinghua University and preparing and all that. And she was a graduate from Tsinghua herself. She volunteered to sit down and mentor, brought up books, even taught her and all that. You know how that went in a very long way, building relationship, right? That's very important. I've got budget coming from a big Shell group, people. But what I do essentially is I create a sense of camaraderie, not just with one customer. A few customers come in because if I have a new product launch, for example, I would invite them to an event, a golfing competition event, for example, with dinners and all that. I would actually document the things I'm going to do. I actually have a member in a flight for with all the various customers, and they would golf and they actually enjoyed the food, the drinks, all paid for, and they all come about feeling good. Because all this I will also publish, and some of the games they give out for charities, they win this, they get, how would I say, increased reputation. They feel good because this game you win this, you get into you get orphanages and that's value to them. It's never about money. You need to realize it's about trust, it's about building friendship, and if it's something around a win-win situation, how can you boost the other guy's reputation or feel-good factor? And there are many ways around it. Bits around that are even entertaining, that's not corruption, is building people on boats. Well, we had the opportunity, we have yacht rides. Of course, some areas safety-wise, you never allowed them because the safety of the boats are not good. But simple things that I do with customers is actually I invite them for dinners with my wife. I bring my family along, and then they bring their family along, and you imagine the personal bonds you build. I also make sure that I do my stakeholder mapping well. What does that mean? Typically it's the younger ones that will ask for this. And I know at the end of the day how to navigate within the system that you come to the decision makers. Yes, I mean in some areas grey ones, right? And in golf, you capture your customer for 4 and 5 hours. When you play with him, you know his character, and depending on how you golf with him, you sit down and golf in the buggy with him, you'll be talking it out and discussing things and being open, versus singing, drinking, and at the end of the day, is it going to be 4 or 5 hours? So the value, think about it, the value of, for me, golf is better. And of course, some of my team don't play golf. There are other things. They even play mahjong. There are mahjong games. I went around playing mahjong with them, and I encourage it. It's not about giving money. They tabulate it and make sure it's fair and game, and it's building that camaraderie. Inviting people for Chinese New Year. Of course, ang pao is very sensitive depending on the country, but they make sure that it's open, it's tabulated. They don't receive that. It's just normal, and they give it to the kids without over the certain limit. But more important is opening your heart, and that, to the younger generation, is a way to go it a long way. Of course, when stay away for those who are just purely corrupt and you can't get away, do your stakeholder mapping. Look at somebody above and below. Even the younger ones, they're good. In some ways, if you find you're not going to corrupt, but you give him an opportunity, say, hey, I know of this business opportunity, this new information. What's wrong with giving him information? You're doing a service to them, but you're not paying him. So think value versus outright money. So these are some of the creative ways to go around corruption. Let's not get the wrong idea that I think karaoke is all corrupt. No, it's not. I even had team building karaoke in Lam Kwai Fong in Hong Kong, where my GMs would go in, I would disperse out their targets, and they'll go drinking and singing and all that. So don't get me wrong. You always have to take that into context of the cultural differences and the local sensitivities. There is no one set formula, right? My kids like to go karaoke, in Singapore, family karaoke, right? But I think the acid test would be, let's put it this way, if you get caught, on a particular event or situation, and that's published in the newspaper or some media. Now the question is, will you be embarrassed? Will the company reputation be at a loss and feel embarrassed? So that would be the asset test, I would say. Because if you did an event or something and it's published and you realize that, hey, published fine, nothing untoward's happening, and there isn't something morally wrong, and so it will come down to a judgment call. And I like to think the judgment call would be, I would call the newspaper test. If a journalist or photographer took that pictures, will you be embarrassed, or will your company's reputation be hit for that? And therefore, think through how that implication to an external party will look like. Doesn't mean that the thing comes out and makes you not embarrassed, but you may have an answer to it. So fine, there's always a way to feedback to the newspaper, the context of certain things. Do recognize sometimes pictures are taken out of context, but the question is, will you or will your company be embarrassed when an event or a situation gets published in the media? And I think that would be, my view, the asset test around whether it's a gray or like a white area. I was heading up Japan for my company. Probably a good, I think a lot of people are not aware. I was actually in Japan when the 2011 mega earthquake and tsunami hit the country. I was on the top floor having a senior management meeting, and all of a sudden the earthquake hit. And typically earthquakes, we've had tremors quite a lot, but this was horrendous because all of a sudden cupboards were falling off. And because we were at the top floor, a penthouse, across Tokyo Bay, I could see explosion in the Cosmo oil refinery. It went boom. And honestly, it was also horrendous for me because being on a building at the top floor and the building was swaying, you kind of wonder whether it would collapse. I was praying. Fortunately, nothing happened and all that. But I'm not going into the specifics around the earthquake itself. I'd like to go specifics around what happened, the psyche of the Japanese people itself. So after the earthquake, transportation was stopped. Trains were not working. Roads were blocked. And because I worked my office was in Daiba, and the way to get across was over the Rainbow Bridge. The suspension bridge was closed. I needed to get back to my family, which is about 30 kilometers away. Lo and behold, lucky to be NS, we're all SDF trained, right? So 30 kilometers, and look, it was springtime. It's not as though it's hot weather in Singapore. I was able. But what impressed me along the way, as I was going back to my family, the 7-Elevens of Japan, you've got 7-Elevens, you've got things like Family Mart. You realize that there were no looting. In Singapore, when we had COVID, the first thing that happened was toilet papers are all gone. Everybody were, kind of like keeping stocks and buying. I won't call it looting, rushing. There were no rushing. Supermarkets were open, grocers were opening, and as I was going back, you know what they did? They saw me. Are you hungry? Are you thirsty? These people, shop owners, open up their shop, inviting people, if they're hungry or anything, please come and take. Can you see where the Japanese people are? That sense of discipline, that sense of camaraderie, the sense of family. And honestly, I've worked in so many different parts of the world, I've not seen it. I don't think anywhere else in Asia you'll find it that way. Through the days I went through also, I give you an example where water, food, everything was scarce in supermarket. I lived in the suburbs, so there's this called OK Mart, which is a typical Japanese supermarket. People were queuing up. They were not hogging. And they will just buy minimal essentials. And there even be a certain area where they themselves and even the staff would say, don't buy that because it's meant for people with young family. Young wives, young mothers who needed milk for their children, and they will self-sacrifice, they will plan, and I would say, gosh, this is a first world country. Now that being said, the Japanese psyche is such that sometimes their strength is also their weakness. Their ability to gel, the ability to work as a team is fantastic. However, one of their weakness was, having been a leader there, I also realized that the way they're taught, the way they culture, you never stand up like a nail and you get hammered down. So that sense of coming up and say, let's lead these or new creative ideas. So when a Japanese company have a set of standard operating procedures, quality control, they are fantastic. But when a spanner gets into the works, that's where I think they struggle. Now, one of the things that I discovered then, where as a foreigner, and I guess would help me being army trained, all of us, that So those who gone through NS, I was a regular before. So that training that you had is invaluable. Your reservist training is invaluable because I was the only one who could take charge through a crisis like that. Got them, all the senior management sitting on the board, and basically I directed them as though I'm a battalion commander, division head. Do a head count, check your assets, legal, go make sure you do your contracts, send out your force majeure letters, look at stock of your supplies, everything. Get through the doctors, when we had that, and it's typical standard practice when you do a crisis management. The Japanese being themselves were lost for word, although they were fair enough, I was the boss, but I could not see a Japanese person heading that for where it is. There's also a little bit of a unique culture that in that area, the concept of leadership struck me even had, and in a lot of ways where I'm proud to be a Singaporean, proud to have that military background. In that period, I'm sad to say that a lot of foreigners abandoned the Japanese. And I'm talking about expats, senior foreigners. In fairness, because of the situation and the supposed threat of the Fukushima and gas, although being there I know was too far, my company even asked me and prepared to me, even the Singapore embassy had called me. They prepared planes for us to evacuate that country. A lot of foreigners, the Americans, the French, the British, big bosses of banks, abandoned them and then leave it to the management. Okay, we will tell them. So a director in safety, HSSE, would just leave and then would say, hey, call it. After they left, called their deputy manager and said, you take charge, I've gone overseas. Can you imagine the bitter taste they've left with the Japanese? That's not being a leader. I was lucky because the way we brought up in the military, I think everyone who's gone through SAFTI and all that OCS would say, the first thing about being a leader is, are you willing to die for your men? It's not about forcing, is how much are you willing to sacrifice for your people? That kind of stuck in me for a long time. So in fairness, my family was taken care of because school holidays were taken over, and when the Singapore embassy arranged for extra flights by SI, I put them back and they came. They were already planning to go on holiday, but I chose to remain because I knew I could handle it. That simple act of remaining with the company within the eyes went a long way. In the Japanese accepting me as one of them. Bear in mind that before I went down, yes, I was seconded there, put there, I'm Asian, but there was still a little bit of that discourse of full acceptance, mainly because I was a foreigner, I'm not a Japanese. Although yes, I spoke Japanese, but in all fairness, they didn't quite like it, the fact that I spoke and understood Japanese, which means they could not have the side conversations without me understanding what they're trying to talk behind my back, right? That's joke aside. But the fact that a simple act that I chose to suffer with them, or perceive suffering with them, to sit down, to go through and help them out, went a long way. So this kind of advice I'll talk to people who aspire to be leaders. There's a difference between a manager and being a leader. A manager basically works on a set of targets that are given to the top and the KPIs to ensure. But a leader itself will be a leader of men or team, would have the courage to take a step back and say, are these KPIs right? Do I therefore protect my men? I'm not saying all the time you need to protect your men. There is a balance about making sure that the company is taken care of. But think through. You are only a manager if you're only working towards KPIs over a certain day. But you are a leader if you're willing to step back and suffer with your men and make sure that whatever consequences they go through, you yourself are beholden to those consequences. And in that simple incident, I mean, it was just a natural because of our SDF bringing, went a long way. And the Japanese had accepted me within that company as one of them. And there was huge respect. From then onwards, that day onwards, I could see a huge difference in how the Japanese accepted me, not just as one of them, the fact that as a leader and they were willing to do whatever I wanted. I mean, figuratively, of course, right? But I could see that my respect up that ladder of influence went up quite a bit with that. So that's a very good experience. And that's the reason why a lot of foreigners in Japan don't quite understand. But probably I was happy that one single event. Being a manager and being a leader is two different things. Yes, they are a culture where it's really involved, but you got to find something where how do you ensure that they respect you? And it's creating that respect that is most important. It's not about taking a whip. Remember, a leader leads. A leader does, yes, sometimes you need to push, but a lot of people think it's always about pushing. No. A leader provides vision. A leader provides motivation. But more importantly, a leader cares for the people around them. That's a leader.